Welcome to the podcast. It's Thursday. We're going to talk some NASCAR with Rod Mullins. And man, I am dodging raindrops and thunderbolts and everything here
Wow.
the heat has gotten to us the last few days, and it's definitely fired up some weather up our way. I'm sure down your way too, Rod. We're coming off of a big weekend in Mexico City with Shane Van Gisbergen, his second career win, but this one, as he's a full-time NASCAR Cup Series driver, gives him a playoff berth.
Yeah, it does. And, it gives him a playoff berth. It's caused some controversy in some ways because Richard Petty has been very outspoken about this since the win by Shane Van Gisbergen, not trying to take anything away from him. But he's kind of questioning now. He says, okay, you're at the bottom of the standings, or so to speak, and how you are in the points and so forth. You've had a so-so year, but you've not really accomplished anything. And this is the second time something like this has happened because you've had somebody that has vaulted into the playoffs. And we're going to talk about Harrison Burton last year. Harrison Burton did the same thing. He won at Daytona, ended up vaulting into the playoffs, and kind of fizzled after about the first two races is what ended up happening. Richard Petty's making the same kind of argument, I think, with this. How do you go and how do you come out of nowhere, run the playoffs, and then try to run the playoffs and call that legitimate? And, he says, you got to win some races. He feels like you got to win races and be more consistent on a regular basis in order to be in the playoffs. But so far, it's kind of fallen on deaf ears unless NASCAR is really listening down in Daytona, trying to come up with a decision about this. But Van Gisbergen won largest margin. I think it was the second largest margin by a NASCAR driver in series history, as he won, I think, by almost 16 seconds, I think, over the other competition. As I go back and I look at it and stuff, he led 60 of the 100 laps. He pretty much dominated this race. He just enjoyed himself so much. I mean, Ty Gibbs looked like the early favorite to kind of break out of his slump and do something here. And then out of nowhere came Van Gisbergen, to the front. Of course, he had won the pole anyway, but he had managed to hold on there toward the front and managed to, take the lead eventually before it was over with. But there were a lot of letdowns this past weekend. Kyle Busch had a good car. I think he fizzled on lap 6 as he got a little bit, as you would say, on ice because the road was wet. The road course was wet, his tires, and then all of a sudden he started to spin and slid into about 3 or 4 other cars, broke the toe end on his car there with the rear suspension, and he was out. And he said, he felt like he had a car that could contend for the front, but they'd never find that out now after he went out at lap 6. And then you had tempers flaring between drivers again, and this time it was Ricky Stenhouse and Carson Hocevar. Carson Hocevar and him get into it. I should say Ricky Stenhouse grabs him by the face mask inside of his car after the race, and then in turn Hocevar gets penalized $50,000 for insensitive comments because of Mexico City. And I've been still trying to find what those insensitive remarks were, but NASCAR is forcing him into sensitivity training over this whole thing. And 50,000, I think, of that money is going to go to Mexico City charities. But a very lively weekend down in Mexico. And of course, Daniel Suarez, he won the Xfinity race too. So hometown product wins, brings the house down in Mexico City. And then we have another international racer in Shane Van Gisbergen winning the road course at Mexico.
As far as Richard Petty's, complaints, I guess that's all they are, is complaints. The rules are what they are. You can change them in a
Right.
future year, but there'd be some legitimacy to his arguments if,
Mm-hmm.
all right, Van Gisbergen is in this particular race. If he's way back in the pack most of the race, there's a restart late. He gets lucky and only leads the last lap, and it's a really close win, and it's just one of those fluke things. This wasn't a fluke thing. This guy dominated
No.
this race, and if you can dominate a race like this, now yeah, he's stronger certainly. We know his history. He's stronger on road courses. That was his win. Was it a couple years ago in Chicago?
Mm-hmm.
This is his strength. But there are at least road course like races in the playoffs if he can get that far. I mean, if the rules say you win a race and that gets you, the extra chance at a playoff berth, that's what the rules are. You can change them in the future, but you can't change them now.
Yeah, you can't change them midway through the season and stuff. I mean, if you change and you've only got 10 races now before the playoffs. And so you really can't change the rules of anything. That's about as bad as, some officiating, which I will not talk about and stuff. I know how officiating can be, but um, here it is. I mean, Richard Petty has got a point, but then again, I think he's kind of barking up the wrong tree, so to speak. The way I feel about this is I know he raced all these different races, won 200 races, won 7 championships. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to take that away from him. But he feels like there should be more effort and more work into winning these races. Well, if that was the case as an owner earlier, he should have probably stuck to that a little bit more when they decided they were going to change the playoffs. He was one of the owners about this whole thing. And he talks like also, he says, the road course interest is waning. It's starting to go away, which Jeff Gordon kind of is like, no, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of like there, but it's not growing so much as it is, some NASCAR fans. And then I got the quote this past week from Kenny Wallace. And Kenny Wallace had made a comment about that there were 75% solid NASCAR fans in this world. They like what's going on with the playoffs. They like the way things are going. And then you've got the 25% that does nothing but grumble, complain, bitch about anything else under the sun and will never be satisfied as a NASCAR fan. So I don't know if Kenny Wallace is trying to make friends and influence people at the same time with his comments, but that's the kind of range we're getting here with some of the comments and the way NASCAR has handled things so far this season.
You know, he might be overestimating how many people are happy, not just in NASCAR, but when you look
Yeah,
at polls of, how people think about politics and life in general, most people are just unhappy. So,
right.
no matter what you do, they're going to be unhappy and they want to complain about something. So, no, if Petty's complaint is, I want, more emphasis on winning, why are you complaining about Shane Van Gisbergen winning?
Right.
He actually
Why
won the
are you?
race.
Yeah. And I mean, in one way, he's a little guy. He's a little guy, and he's winning the race. And Trackhouse, they came out of the gate fast and moving fast when they won some races, but they've been on hard times. And Van Gisbergen is simply trying to say, okay, let's see if I can do something here in this sport of NASCAR. I've been successful in supercars over in New Zealand and Australia, but gosh almighty, we've not had a real international star. We've had Daniel Suarez, but we've not really had an international driver of importance since probably Marcos Ambrose when he was driving for, of all people, Richard Petty. And he won a road course race, I think, at Watkins Glen that year. And that was fighting, dueling, rubbing, any way you want to put it. But I think it's good for the sport. I think it's good that Van Gisbergen is coming in, and you've got some other drivers right now in some of the other sports that's contemplating going to NASCAR, and there's still a big question mark as to what's going to happen with the IndyCar series. Are we going to see drivers from IndyCar making a trek over to NASCAR, NASCAR going over to IndyCar? Because Roger Penske's the one that holds the golden ticket right now as to what's going to happen with the possibility of Indy racing before it's over with. He owns the program. He owns Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We just have to wait and see.
So I'm still trying to. Oh, I think I have found now okay, the Carson host of our comments. I know we wanted to talk about that. You've already mentioned this
Yeah.
in your earlier talk. Looks like he called it a S-hole while raising concerns about
Oh,
safety in the city. And so I found so he did that on the live stream. Among the things he said since maybe a kid that never been out of the country until Thursday should ever give an opinion about why any other places like other than Portage, Michigan, his hometown. Um, let's see. I found another good comment where he talked about. I said not only something that was wrong, I said it without even laying my own two eyes on the track or turning one lap in an actual race at an amazing facility. So yeah, and he also made a funny comment that he might have to move there to hide out from Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, hey, he took a lip chewing, if you want to call it that, from Stenhouse when he got into the car. I mean, he pulled his upper torso into the car, and he was just letting him have it. And Kosovar could only say it, he said, "So I effing messed up is what I did." That was about the only thing he was able to get off his lips because Stenhouse was so hot at him. And Stenhouse feels like this isn't over yet. He's like, we'll wait. I'll get back at him when we back in the States is what I'm going to do. And it's like, it doesn't make any difference if you do it in Mexico, if you do it in the United States, it's still going to transfer across the border. So it doesn't make any difference. Stenhouse is mad though. Stenhouse is very upset over this whole thing. And, I would have expected it more from a Kyle Busch, but I guess that goes to show you we're kind of seeing the difference in the way the drivers are. And Stenhouse, he's fighting. He's fighting where he's at right now to probably stay with his ride here for the next little bit, and he'll do anything he can to get some attention, positive or negative, his way to where the fans can get behind him.
weren't we talking just last week about those two guys being mad at each other? Or it was
Yeah,
recently, right? I mean,
yeah, it was.
what the, and then if I'm NASCAR, okay, I'm saying I'm hearing a guy say, I'm going to get back at him.
Yeah,
And I'm thinking, no, you're not. And I want you
no,
to acknowledge publicly you're not, because this isn't, I mean, in baseball, you throw if the one team throws at Juan Soto, you throw at their slugger. Of course, that's dangerous because you can hit a guy in the head with a
right.
baseball. But these are cars going a couple hundred miles an hour in some cases. This isn't something to just play around with and get even with. This can be very dangerous stuff. I would want to snuff that out as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think I would too. Definitely at open speeds of they'll get close to almost 190, maybe 200 miles an hour, 190 probably at Pocono this weekend. But there's a big wide stretch of road. I mean, they can just go anywhere they want to on the Pocono track. But yeah, I mean, I can see him giving a bump to him, kind of an unfriendly bump every now and then to him just to say, "Hey, I'm here." But to try to deliberately try to race him and wreck him and stuff, yeah, that's kind of putting safety on the line here with NASCAR, and they need to look at that. But I don't know. We've seen some other things from other drivers before, huh? How many times can we say Dale Earnhardt wrecked somebody? I mean, he wrecked somebody, and what did NASCAR do? They just set him down and they calmed him down, and they told him, said, "You can't be doing this," and he'd be cool for a little while, then he'd be right back at it again. So
To me, it's a little, Dale Earnhardt racing hard, wrecking guys is one thing. Another thing is,
yeah,
I'm going to get even with you.
yeah,
And of course that could just be bluster. Look, I want to be a man. I don't want to, I want to stand up to him, that kind of thing. So who knows?
right.
You mentioned Pocono. One thing coming up with Pocono that's going to be fun is, okay, so Dale Earnhardt Jr., of course, on the broadcast on Sunday, but he's going to have a different job on Saturday. What's he going to be doing on Saturday?
Well, he's going to be the crew chief for Connor, gosh, here I had the name here, Connor Zillich in the Xfinity race. And it's kind of a switch for him. He won't be, of course, CW does the Xfinity races, so he won't have to worry about that. But he's going to be replacing Marty Lindley as crew chief, and that's following Lindley being suspended for loose lug nuts following the Xfinity race in Nashville 2 weeks ago. So he's having to serve out his penalty there. And so Dale Jr. is moving into the crew chief stand, and he's kind of looking forward to it. He says it's his first race as a crew chief, and of course he's two-time champion of the series, 24 wins career there and stuff. So I think he's got a good chance at being able to make some calls and some shots for that team. Of course, it's his own team, Junior Motorsports. So we'll just have to see how Dale does. If Dale can really complete his, I guess, all about circle, his coming about, that circling moment. I think that's really wild, just that he's wanting to be a crew chief, or he's going to step in as crew chief. Who knows? He might even try to blow the whistle on some stuff that NASCAR may be calling in the pits and being too tight and being too rigid on some of their rules, and call him on the carpet over it. I mean, if he gets suspended, what are they going to do to him? It's going to be he won't be crew chief, and then Amazon is finishing up this weekend with their last race, so they can't really ban him from the track from being up in the press box. So there's a variety of different things I think that Dale Jr. is trying to get accomplished with this stint as a crew chief.
I mean, it's one. It'll certainly, he's got the driving experience that he can use when he's in the announcing booth. But this will give him a different experience when he's going down the road in the future as an announcer. Now, a question came to mind as you were talking there, as we're talking about Dale Earnhardt Jr. At least a one-off as a crew chief.
Mhm.
Other guys, prominent drivers who've made either a one-off or a few races, or even become a permanent crew chief. Does anybody come to mind? On the stature of a Dale Earnhardt Jr.
Not really right offhand. Nobody comes to my mind almost immediately. I would say probably the only one that comes to my mind is Kirk Shelmerdine, and he was crew chief for Dale Earnhardt for a while, and then worked at Richard Childress Motorsports. But he kind of went into driving on his own and still trying to, in one way, call the shots, so to speak, because he had been a crew chief and tried to be a driver. I don't know if you remember the days. You remember the days of the Big Johnson sponsorship on
Yeah,
the cars, the
yeah,
T-shirts, and everything.
yeah.
That's what he was. That's what he was running for this particular race team. But he was trying his hand at running races in NASCAR, and it didn't last very long. But he's about the only one I can think of.
That's the skill sets. I mean, so it's the same sport, but obviously the driving skill set. I mean, I guess I was trying to think. There are so many people who make the transition from in stick and ball sports from
Right.
player to coach. But when you start thinking about it, there aren't many great players who become coaches. It's usually guys who kind of grinded, had to learn the
Right.
sport differently, maybe didn't have the skill as players, but had the skill to lead. And maybe that's the thing. I don't know. It's maybe there's a commonality there. I don't know.
There may be, I think with some of the drivers, well, I would say this to one degree or another. Richard Petty was probably he called some shots in the pits when you had Robbie Loomis there, you had Mike Beam there, you had so many different crew chiefs that he had at one time after he retired. Uh, he probably made many calls, but he's making calls based upon the feel of the car, the sound of the car, how everything else is going. If he feels like there's a tire going down, he says, I've got to come pit. I'm going to have to come in and pit. Now it's one of those things where the crew chief does listen to the driver, but they rely more on telemetry and all of this stuff that's coming in off of the car, and then also what they're getting back from their race shop in North Carolina. They've got to be hooked up, and that's something that some people don't understand, I guess, to a degree, that these guys are so hooked up to the internet and wireless to where they can go and they have to watch these things like engine temperature, and they get a feel of how hot the brakes are. They have sensors all over these cars to tell them that, and they're able to tell them. The only thing that they're not able to tell them accurately is how much gas they've got in their car. They have to rely on what they've put in there and stuff, and making sure that's what's going to get them across the start finish line. So it's kind of like a thing of where your light comes on, gas, and it kind of tells you, yeah, you're running empty, but you don't know how far you're going to have till you can make it to that gas station. So do you pull off now, or do you risk running out of gas before you get to the next gas station that's a penny or two cheaper on the gallon? So I guess
You
that's
know,
the
our
way I look at it.
our new Ford Bronco, and I haven't tested it to see if how accurate it is, but it'll tell you, hey, you got 45 miles left until the next gas station. Now, again, I don't want to get to like 1 mile left and just see if I don't want to test it. I don't want to tempt it, but but yeah, that will be the next frontier. But what you're saying there then is with NASCAR crew chiefs, it's just like coaches in the stick and ball sports.
Yep.
It used to be intuitive. It used to be, you went with your gut. And now there's not a lot of gut. It's a lot of metrics that tell you
Right.
what to do, and your job is just to be able to interpret those metrics and make sure you make the right decisions based on what the numbers are telling you to do.
Yeah, the old school stuff is pretty much out. I know that I would love to get back to the old school way of driving and the way that, the drivers still do here on Saturday nights at the local NASCAR tracks, because that's fun. That's excitement. You're kind of seeing how far you can push that car to go in a 25 lap feature. And also, are you going to have enough tires? Are you going to have enough fuel? Did you put enough fuel in? Have you burned so much fuel in the caution period or during a caution period that you can make it? I mean, these cars are a far cry today from what they were, and still what they are today on the local circuit. And I think of people like Andy Petrie, who has been at Richard Childress Racing. He stepped down here. I guess it's been in the past year. He stepped down from his job there in at Richard Childress Racing, and I just don't think it's there anymore. These guys, it's kind of like our comparison when we've talked about it before about baseball. We look at things from one perspective, and then there's the Billy Ball perspective. You look at things how they are, and statistically, and that's what a lot of people are leaning on because, well, for the A's, it proved to be a gold mine there for them. With a lot of things, they were able to play a lot of these stars or a lot of these semi-stars, if you want to call it that, and they got their exposure out of it, and they won some games. But it still doesn't erase the fact that you have to go and have to have some kind of gut feeling or some kind of knowledge of, what you're looking for. What kind of things are you looking for as a coach? Same thing goes for NASCAR.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. There were a couple other news and notes items, Rod, that you wanted to bring in before we talked about Pocono. What were those?
Well, a couple of those. There was one I was going to bring up to you. NHRA back in your neck of the woods up there near Richmond this weekend. They're going to be running at Virginia, the Virginia Nationals up there. It's the return after 1 year ago when John Force had that horrifying crash that pretty much has forced him to the sidelines as a retiree now from what he was doing. We're going to see how Brittany Force and her company, Austin Prock, and then also Jack Beckman, how they do, because they've had a bad stretch of races here in the last little bit. And that includes Austin Prock, who went out in the first round, and Jack Beckman, who also went out in the first round at Bristol. They're going to see if they can't get back up on the right end of the racetrack and see what they can do this coming weekend there in Richmond. That ought to be a good little show. There's going to be people, I guess it's going to be tiptoeing maybe around some things and stuff with it. I understand John Force is supposed to be back there, and I can believe that with John Force coming back, because he's not going to let something like that whip him. He's not going to let that track, take him down or anything like that. He's going to be back to show everybody, hey, I'm still John Force. I may not be driving anything, but I'm still here. At least what there is of me and stuff there is here. Because he talked to me several years ago. He didn't know how much longer he was going to have in the sport, considering the head injuries he had. That was one thing he talked to me about. And I talked with Susan Wade down at Bristol about it, and she said, I can't understand, why he kind of stayed in it this long. And it's just something like with Petty or some of the other drivers. Sometimes you stick into it, with the sport or whatever you're doing with a little bit more veracity than maybe what other drivers would do, because that's the only life you know. That's the only thing you've ever known for so many years.
It's hard to give up what you're good at and what
Yeah,
you love
it
and what
is.
you've done for a long time. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
All right, get us ready
But
for Pocono then this weekend.
well, we always talk about Pocono as being the tricky triangle. Um, it's going to be tricky this coming weekend. There'll be probably a lot of people that will be out there on the track that'll be looking for a win out of this one. Chase Elliott won this race after Denny Hamlin was disqualified here a couple of years ago. He won this race, and Hamlin is coming back after missing out. We didn't have a chance to talk about him this week at Mexico, but he was doing father duty, as he is now the father of a son that was born while he was in Mexico City, or while they were in Mexico City. So he's coming back. He'll be back this weekend at Pocono to race. Pocono's been one of his better tracks. We'll have to see what he ends up doing, and as long as he can stay out of trouble, he may end up winning a race. But we'll just have to see if NASCAR is going to be looking at him for any kind of things about a little bit of tape hanging off the edge like it should, giving aerodynamic push or aerodynamic edge to that driver. There's some drivers right now, though, that need some good performances and need a good race. And one of those is Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace has not won since Kansas in 2023. He's been running well this year, but he's taking a hit right now in the points. He's taking a hit and he's going down. He needs something to stop and try to stop him and get him back into contention here before it's over with. So that's what's going to be a telltale sign for this weekend. I mean, with Bubba Wallace there, Denny Hamlin trying to make a run at it, I look for the Toyotas to kind of have a little bit of a strong point. I would also look for Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs had a good race at Mexico. We'll see how he does up here at Pocono this time around. But again, it's anybody's race. I don't know. What did I call last week? Did I say Van Gisbergen might even turn around and win this race? I don't know. It was just it's kind of hard to predict going into some of these races anymore.
I'm just looking at Pocono, it just reminds you how different this track is than, it's a 2.5 miles of super speedway. You get
Yeah,
going fast, those long straightaways, but three turns. I mean, it's
yeah, three turns.
that's interesting. I mean, it challenges the racers in a very different way than really any other track.
Yeah, it's dog legs. That's what they call them, the dog legs and the everything of the. And then when you get to the turn three part before you start coming back, there's a thing of on the wall there at Pocono. It says turn four. What turn four? Because they've taken it out. There is no turn four there at Pocono. But this is a race right now that I think for some people they're down to one race now. They're only racing once a year at Pocono, and there are people that are wondering. Here's where I was going to bring you the last thought. There are people, especially in NASCAR, wondering if whether or not they might ought to take Pocono, put it off the schedule, and maybe go 2 hours up the road to Philadelphia and run at Lincoln, or what is it? Is it Lincoln Stadium or what's it called there? I forget.
The link, so it's Lincoln something, the football stadium,
Lincoln
basically.
Federal, I think, is what it is. Stadium or something like that is what it is. And I think that'd be crazy. I
Yeah.
think that would honestly be crazy to go and put a NASCAR race and race inside of the stadium or there around the stadium. Um, I guess I'm looking at the Philadelphia fans, how awful some of these Philadelphia fans can be, and I wonder how would NASCAR go over in Philadelphia.
Yeah. 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 I can't imagine why you would go away from a historic track that
Mm-hmm.
has long, been it's an actual track. You don't have to build
Yeah.
something out of nothing. And to just to say you're in Philadelphia. I mean, I don't get that. I don't understand the idea. Hopefully it doesn't materialize because it seems
I
like a
hope it doesn't
stupid
either
idea.
because it would be a terrible slap to the Matoli family and Dr. Joseph Matoli, who has, I mean, he had poured his heart and soul, and that family has, into that track, and it's one of the premier tracks in Pennsylvania. And I mean, it's 2 hours away from Philadelphia. It's in the mountains. They say it's one of the most breathtaking, comfortable times that you can go up there and you can race because it's not too hot. It's comfortable. Of course, we've seen some strange things happen at Pocono before. I think there was one year Kyle Petty was coming down the back stretch or coming down that one stretch near some wooded land, and a deer jumps out onto the track and goes across and then jumps over the outside retaining wall. And he'd come across, and nobody was like, "Hey, where'd that deer come from?"
Yeah.
That's the kind of race that they have, and I'm wanting to say that they had trouble with a crazy groundhog or something up there one year. So I mean, it's in the middle of nature, if you want to call it that. That's what it is. So
It's the spirit of NASCAR, which started
right.
because guys were trying to run bootleg moonshine away from the revenuers. So yeah, I mean, you had to, every once in a while there'd be a deer in the road or groundhog.
Well, I'll tell you this: I would give it up. on doing a podcast anymore if a possum comes going across that track on Sunday. If a possum comes waddling out on that track, or a skunk for that matter, hey, you can just go ahead and rest assured I've cashed it in, because there's just no way I can talk about something like that.
Well, let's root against that. So, well, we'll look forward to Rod's coverage from on the Pocono racing this weekend. And until then, Rod, thank you as always for your time and your insight.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks.